We all agreed. You're not invited to the wedding, my mom said, stirring her tea without looking at me. Her tone was flat. Polite. Like she was reading a line from a script. I thought I'd misheard. But then she took a slow sip and added, "It's better this way." I blinked. What? That was all I could manage. One word. My heart was already racing. I looked from her to my dad, who sat quietly on the other side of the table, eyes glued to his coffee like it might save him from having to speak. She didn't flinch. It wasn't just me. Your father, Claire, everyone agreed. You bring tension, Lily. And Claire's day should be peaceful. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd it felt staged. Like I'd walked into a nightmare. I couldn't wake from a peaceful. That's what they called my absence. Convenient. Clean. I was being cut out of the biggest event in my sister's life, and the reason was my presence disturbed the aesthetic. Not because I did something wrong. But because I existed too loudly for them. I tried to breathe. Tried to stay calm. Claire really doesn't want me there? My mom didn't hesitate. She said it would be uncomfortable. For her. For the guests. For you. That last part felt like a slap wearing perfume. Like they were doing me a favor by uninviting me. My father finally spoke. This isn't about punishing you. It's about keeping the focus where it belongs. I wanted to scream. Since when was I the spotlight thief? I'd spent years shrinking myself at every family event just to avoid becoming a problem. I swallowed hard. I helped her design the invitations, I said, almost to myself. She used my exact layout. I spent 3 nights working on them. My mom tilted her head like she was being patient. That was nice of you. But you weren't asked to attend. That sentence hit harder than I expected. You weren't asked to attend. Not left out by accident. Not a miscommunication. A deliberate decision. A vote, apparently. A meeting where everyone I was related to agreed I didn't belong. I asked. What exactly did I do? My mom sighed like I was exhausting her. You know how you are, Lily. You make things heavy. Claire doesn't want to feel judged on her day. That was the story. I was heavy. I was judgment. I was unwanted. All I ever did was exist differently. I didn't perform the way Claire did. I didn't fake smile for relatives who whispered about me later. I wasn't graceful or delicate. I was just me. And somehow, being myself was enough to get me erased. I didn't cry. Not in front of them. That would have given them the satisfaction of saying, "See? Too emotional." Instead, I nodded. Picked up my bag. Said, "Got it." My father opened his mouth like he might add something. But nothing came out. When I got home, I sat in silence for hours. Stared at the wall. Remembered all the birthdays I showed up for. The babysitting. The last-minute favors. The fact that I never once asked for anything back. And this was my return, rejection, served with tea. They didn't say, "We're sorry." They didn't say, "This is hard." They didn't even say they'd miss me. Just, "It's for the best." A phrase people use when they're trying to make cruelty sound like wisdom. It wasn't just about the wedding. It was about the choice. The ease with which they pushed me out. The comfort they felt doing it. Like it wasn't a betrayal. Like it was a maintenance decision. Like I was a squeaky door they decided not to fix. I stared at my phone that night. No messages from Claire. Nothing from my parents. The silence was so loud I almost laughed again. This wasn't an oversight. This was who they always were. That night, I promised myself something. If I wasn't invited to their celebration, they wouldn't be welcome in my success. From childhood, I felt like a bodyguard to my sister's happiness. Claire was charismatic, radiant, effortless. I was the quiet organizer behind every school play, every birthday gift, never seen, always serving. Teachers praised her spark. They labeled me serious. My family called it balance. But I called it invisibility. If Claire was light, I was background. If she was noise, I was silence. And in their eyes, silence meant nothing, not a kind of strength, just absence. When Claire got into the state university, her dream, they threw a party. Daniel, oops, Claire, got balloons, a scrapbook, even a trip. She sang, danced. I worked the cameras and edited photos later. I never saw her gratitude. Only her bright spotlight. Every holiday gathering followed the same routine. Claire in pearls, cake, laughter. Me? I was table clearer and cleanup crew. Handing napkins, pouring drinks, checking on aunts, even as they whispered, "Why is she always here, yet so quiet?" My presence became duty, not love. In college, I stayed home to pay bills. My parents never said I was responsible. They said I was mature. As if maturity was a badge of shame. I studied fine arts and freelance designed portfolios. They never asked about my career. They had no space for nuance. Claire majored in communications. Her career was public. My freelance design agency? Too murky. Too creative. Eventually, I stopped trying to explain. Mother would say, well, at least she's consistent. Meaning, she wasn't worth attention. And consistent invisibility didn't merit applause. My dad quietly believed in me. He asked thoughtful questions, once or twice, though he'd never cross Karen. So I adapted. Answered logistics, clarified risks. He'd nod subtly. That nod meant more than years of polite disinterest from everyone else. When Claire got engaged, I offered to help with the invitations. My suggestions, color swatches, font picks. I even volunteered to draw the cake sketches. I wanted to be part of her joy. My family called me helpful. Like that absolved them from calling me sister. The wedding was months away. My invitations, my work, tirelessly handled. Yet no one saw me. Mom never thought to ask if I was excited. Just matter-of-factly reported, she's helping behind the scenes, best she stays focused. Claire's fiancé never asked for my name. Never said thank you. I remained nameless, despite my blood and sweat. I wasn't offended. Just accustomed. I learned that wounds get smaller when they repeat every year. My friends would ask, why do you do it? I'd shrug, smile. It's family. That word grew bitter. Love felt transactional to me. They only gave credit when it was convenient. Or accompanied by applause. Never for steady presence. I learned to eat my pain silently over the family table. No one witnessed the nights I cried over spilled frosting in the kitchen. No one saw the shift I held under fluorescent lighting so guests wouldn't notice. Pain stayed under blacklight. By 27, I was tired. Tired of being the foundation. No one acknowledged. But hopeful enough to let them invite me. Even with the scars, I believed love could outgrow old patterns, until that TEA.so yes, this rejection wasn't new. It was a lifetime in process. The red flags weren't dramatic. They were almost invisible. Like when Mom called me by my initials instead of my name in front of guests. Lily J. sounded more like a project than a daughter. Claire got nicknames. I got silence. Dad's favorites. Always had punchlines. Lily's art is interesting, he'd say at gatherings. Guests would nod politely and change the subject. Claire got praise for her photos. My designs hung without comment. As if being omitted made them worth less. When I got my first paid freelance gig, I told Mom. She said, that's nice, dear, while texting Claire about her engagement ring. That same day I landed Manor Gallery's poster project. No one celebrated. But when Claire got book recommendations for planning her registry, balloons appeared at home. They called my work quirky, hobby-ish. They couldn't even use the word creative without smirking. When Aunt Rachel congratulated me on an award, my mother brushed it off mid-conversation. Lily's so passionate, she said. As if being passionate was the same as being accomplished. Family portraits were always centered around Claire. I stood at the edges, cropped out of some shots entirely. When I pointed it out, I was told, smile for the camera, Lily. You're ruining the vibe. Then Claire's picture ended up on every living room wall. At holiday meals, Claire's achievements got toasts. My contributions got footnotes. I once planned an entire silent auction fundraiser for Dad's charities. He toasted Claire's baking instead. My efforts never seemed celebratory enough. One Christmas, I bought matching pajamas for Claire and Mom. They posed for the photo, their arms around each other. I waited for them to include me. They posted the photo online. I was inexplicably out of frame again. My gift served as their backdrop. When I tried to speak up, gentle, conversationally, they called me sensitive. Claire would roll her eyes. I learned to laugh softly so no one felt accused. It was easier to hide than to hurt again. Then glimpses of what my life could have been flickered. When clients praised my catalogs online, I'd screenshot them, because my family never asked. When I got featured in Creative Design magazine, I published it quietly. Maybe no one noticed. But it meant something. Each small slight stacked like bricks. A building of dismissal I couldn't dismantle, until it collapsed. I believed the pattern would shift if I just held on long enough. I believed inclusion was worth waiting for. But each little erasure chipped away at hope. The worst red flag was when Claire launched her wedding website and used fonts I picked. My contribution everywhere but acknowledged nowhere. I commented praise under her post. She liked it, as if she thought I was speaking from outside the family. The pain of being invisible felt heavier than a slap. Because slaps heal. Silence doesn't. It echoes until you start believing you never mattered at all, and in that moment, I realized, if silence is my inheritance, I need to build a new legacy for myself, before they rewrite history completely. It wasn't a whisper. It was the announcement. My mother leaned in, at lunch, and told me I wasn't welcome at my sister's wedding. Not because of distance or cost. But because I brought the wrong energy. In public. To family. To Claire's Moment, they didn't tell me later. They told me then, like I was a problem they quietly resolved. Clocks ticked. Servers passed. My breath tightened. My hand shook faintly. I wasn't angry yet. I was registering murder in daylight, the killing of my dignity. I'd helped Claire pick her dream dress. The engagement photos. Designed her invitations. Spent weekends testing menus. But yes, apparently I didn't bring good energy. The same energy that built their wedding. Just not someone they wanted to see before I could protest, Claire said. Nothing. Sat in silence. Let it happen. Held her glass. Let her mother make my punishment sound like concern. It was a betrayal made public, front row seats at my own exclusion. I left that table calmer than I'd ever felt. No tears. No threats. Just a slow burn of clarity. Their choice said everything. If I'd never been seen, it was because they never wanted to see me. And now, that truth was as clear as daylight. I went home. Drank a glass of water. Sat on the edge of my bed. Held my phone and stood firm against the urge to call, to beg, to ask them to let themselves be embarrassed by apology. They hurt me. Sure. But more than that, they taught me exactly which side of the line they wanted me left on. And I'd spent too many years dancing around it, quiet as shadows, so they could keep their view reflected just right. Aunt Rachel texted later that night. I'm so sorry, my flower. We can talk whenever you want. Her kindness was a balm. But the wound was broader. This wasn't simple rejection. This was systemic erasure, assigned in a verdict, sealed with false kindness. I stayed up. Opened my sketchbook, doodled floral motifs and calligraphy scripts in silent defiance. Weeping didn't help. Buying time didn't help. Submissive apologies didn't help, not anymore. I sent Claire a quiet reply, congratulations. I hope your day feels as beautiful as it looks. No mention of invitation. No plea. Just grace. The kind they never knew how to grant me because this wasn't forgiveness. It was release. I went to sleep with one new thought prompting the next. If I'm not part of this moment, then it's not my moment, and if I'm not invited, I don't serve. The night after lunch, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, rewinding that moment like a broken record. My mother's words echoed, "You bring tension." I realized that I carried expectations they refused to meet, and for that, they blamed me. I replayed every invitation I declined quietly. Every time I said, "It's fine." I had grown used to diminishing myself to avoid making waves. But tonight, I missed the waves. I missed being loud enough to be noticed. Not to impress, but just to exist fully. I opened old messages from Claire. She texted, "Cannot wait for you there," before the invite was pulled. I scrolled past the pre-wedding photos I'd labeled, "For Lily." Irony burned me. That girl thought she included me. But I was already gone in her draft. I thought of Aunt Rachel's voice, soft in her text, "They're wrong. You know who you are." My heart clenched at her kindness, because it stabbed at the family absence I had internalized for so long. It was a comfort and a wound in one breath. I sat at my desk, coffee growing cold. Opened my sketchbooks. Doodles of flowers morphed into ornate frames that couldn't contain words. Nothing healed. But words questioned everything. I wrote, "If I'm not invited, do I still belong?" Then I looked at my bank account balance, the product of sleepless nights of freelance gigs, carefully saved for emergencies. My safety net. I realized this collapse wasn't about love. It was about dignity. I'd been surviving without needing their approval. My phone lit up with missed family messages. One from Claire, "Just didn't want drama." I held on to that. It was the essence of everything. My calmness had been treated as threat. My absence, hygiene. I didn't cry. Tears would have meant I cared still. So I listened to quiet playlists. Let the notes tremble where voices refused to. I was grieving, yes, but not what they took. I grieved what I gave away every time I forgave them for erasing me. My body curled around a pillow. I thought about every time I cleared tables, every surprise dessert I brought to family dinners, every quiet smile I offered. Those gestures had become expectations of an invisible role I never intended to keep. I wasn't angry. Anger is loud and needs an audience. I felt a gray sadness that settled deeper than tears could reach. That's what silence does when it's chosen by others. It becomes a permanent echo. By dawn's light, something shifted. I sat up, rubbed cold arms, and typed into my phone notes, "I will never shrink for your comfort again." Not vengeance. Not notoriety. Just my freedom conjured in language. I stretched, pressed save, and closed the notebook. I realized collapse didn't end me. It showed me where my edges had softened, where I'd lost myself trying to minimize others' discomfort, and in that softness, I found something harder, resolve. I woke that morning with a quiet determination. Cup of coffee in hand, I opened my archives, saved emails, texts, notes. Nothing dramatic, just ordinary messages of my involvement, draft invites, timelines, budgets. Each one a breadcrumb proving I had been there, really present. Claire's congrats. Let's celebrate text surprised me. It arrived before the uninvitation. I compared the timestamps. She knew I'd be cut before the wedding. That wasn't a slip-up, it was cruelty with RSVP. I scrolled through my email thread with Dad. He'd asked for projections for my freelance income 6 months ago, more detailed than any family conversation I'd had since I was 12. He valued my insight. They just refused to admit it. I dug up Aunt Rachel's old voice note. You're everything they deny you. Her words, quiet but steady, echoed truths buried for years. She'd seen me as daughter. I'd forgotten how that felt until her gentle reminder. I looked at the planner file. Every element of Claire's wedding was crafted with my hands. Fonts chosen. Colors balanced. Logistics mapped. No credit. No signature. Nothing. Yet everyone treated the wedding as if someone else built it. I graded myself for staying silent all those years. But the maps, the invoices, the diagrams, these were my legacy. If they wiped me from the guest list, they wouldn't erase my role. Not this time. Invoices showed I'd offered services at cost, my contribution labeled family support. I updated them, normalized fair rates. No free services. No discounts. No more sacrifices for applause that never came. I read through old voicemails. My tone while coaching Claire through vendor calls. My father's quiet, that's smart, in response. Not warmth, but respect. Evidence, again, of what was real. Beneath their dismissive words. I opened a text from last year, Claire asking for fabric selections, credit line. I delivered, every single time. The reminder stung. My kindness was taken as granted. My presence as optioned. I printed everything. Labeled it, proof of contribution and legacy. It wasn't for them. It was for me. A scannable record of every contribution made invisible. At work, I shared the documents, anonymously, except for my name field, inside a secure drive. I told myself, you matter too much to vanish into someone else's fairy tale. That afternoon, Aunt Rachel called. You don't have to make sense to people who prefer stories over truth, she reminded me. I listened and realized, it wasn't just about the wedding. It was about every time I swallowed my voice. By evening, I emailed Claire the documentation, no apology, no accusation. Just facts. If invisibility was your choice, fine. Here's what you erased. I felt a chill. But it was uplifted by clarity. Friends reached out. That's your art, one said, you didn't destroy it, you claimed it. They saw what I was doing. Naming it sealed it. Ownership became my healing. I tested my resolve. Did I want acknowledgement? Maybe. But some truths don't need permission. Mine was one. That night, I sent the final message. I'm done giving pieces of myself to people who broke mirrors. And I meant it. In that moment, everything fell into place. The evidence wasn't revenge, it was restoration. I didn't crash the wedding. That would have been too loud, too easy. Instead, I printed the revised invitation designs, the ones I created, and framed them. Not out of spite, but as proof. My fingerprints were everywhere, whether they liked it or not. Then I emailed a full portfolio to the wedding venue. A simple note, all creative rights belong to Lily Morgan Design Studio. For future event collaborations, please credit accordingly. I didn't need applause. I needed acknowledgement. 3 days later, the venue's Instagram posted a wedding highlight reel. In the caption, design credits to Lily Morgan Studio. It was the first time my name had ever stood beside theirs. Not because they invited me, but because I took up the space they denied me. My mother saw it. Claire too. Claire texted, why are you doing this? I didn't reply. That question held the same tone they'd used my whole life. How dare you want to be seen? Then Aunt Rachel tagged me publicly. Proud of my niece for her brilliant eye and talent. Some people never get the flowers they deserve. I'm sending them anyway. Her words weren't just kind, they were strategic. She saw what they never did. I was never weak. I was just waiting. Dad called. Left a voicemail. Your mother's upset. Maybe you could tone things down. I deleted it. I wasn't loud, I was finally present. And presence has a way of making ghosts nervous. The next week, I updated my business page. New banner. Portfolio. Creative director behind the Morgan wedding experience. I didn't hide. I branded it. That name they used to erase me? I turned it into a signature. Claire's friend messaged me privately, didn't know you designed all that. Honestly, your work made the day. I stared at the message for a long time. Then smiled. Not because I needed the compliment, but because it meant my silence was over. That month, I was invited to speak at a design conference. Topic: Creating beauty while being undervalued. I stood before a crowd and told my story without naming names. I didn't have to. They saw themselves in every omission I described. My face went on the poster. A photographer captured me mid-speech, hand open, eyes clear. They published it under the quote, "They erased me from the guest list." So I wrote my own. My revenge wasn't burning bridges. It was building a new house where their keys didn't fit. My story spread quietly through people who'd been there, excluded, dismissed, underestimated. And suddenly, being uninvited felt like the beginning, not the ending. The family didn't know what to do. They couldn't deny what was public now. Couldn't spin the silence anymore. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't exposed. I'd simply allowed the truth to breathe, and the truth spoke volumes. I don't go to family dinners anymore. Not out of resentment, but because I no longer negotiate for crumbs. Peace isn't earned through tolerance, it's claimed through clarity. And I finally knew what I would no longer tolerate. My apartment feels warmer now. Not because anything changed in the decor, but because I did. I framed my own designs. Not Claire's wedding. Mine. My work. My name. I see it every day and remember, I was never the background. Clients keep coming. Women mostly. Women who say, "I saw your talk," or, "Your story felt like mine." We don't need to explain. There's a quiet understanding between those who were silenced and those who learned to speak anyway. Aunt Rachel visits once a month. She brings tea, never asks about Claire, and smiles when she sees my framed invitation. She once whispered, "They'll regret losing you." I nodded. Not because I needed that regret. But because she was right, they lost me the moment they chose ease over truth. Claire sent a card. It arrived 2 weeks after the wedding. "Hope you're doing well. No hard feelings." I never replied. Forgiveness isn't a shortcut back into my life. Especially when it arrives wrapped in denial. My father emailed. "Proud of your success." 7 words. No apology. But this time, I didn't ache for more. I had stopped writing letters to people who only ever read headlines. I'm not angry. I don't fantasize about confrontation. I don't rehearse monologues in the shower anymore. I simply remember. And in remembering, I honor the girl who waited too long to be invited to her own family. They called me difficult. I became deliberate. They called me dramatic. I became documented. And when they called me gone, I became present. In the places that mattered. Sometimes, I think about the wedding. Wonder if there was a moment Claire looked around and noticed something missing, not flowers or candles or lighting, but presence. My presence, because that was the real loss. They didn't just exclude me, they revealed themselves, and I revealed who I always was.